it's Jeremy again. Let's talk about Bill Cosby. If you haven't been up on the news, Bill's been in court recently. He faced several charges of sexual assault on several women. Apparently, his MO was to drug the ladies, and then when they were unable to fight back, take advantage of them. At least that's what the accusations are. He was found guilty, and he's now facing 3 to 10 years in prison for sexual assault. Now, he's not a young man. He's old. He could die in prison if it extends out to the 10 years. Now, if he gets on the low end of the scale, well, let's kind of get into it. Bill Cosby, once known as America's Dad, was sentenced Tuesday to 3 to 10 years in a state prison for drugging and sexually assaulting Andrea Constand at his home 14 years ago. Now, this is true. When I was a kid, the Cosby Show was the hottest show on TV. Everybody, it seems, loved that show. You hardly ran into somebody who didn't love the Huxtables. He was Heathcliff. He was a doctor. Great show. Had Rudy and just great show. Loved it. Cosby's bail was revoked and he was escorted from the courthouse in handcuffs. So yeah, I mean, there was no going home. There was no, they cuffed him and they took him right to jail. This was a serious crime, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania Judge Stephen O'Neill said. Mr. Cosby, this has all circled back to you. The day has come. The time has come. Cosby, convicted in April of aggravated indecent assault, declined to speak to the court prior to the sentence. His attorneys have filed an appeal. Now, of course, they're going to file an appeal. They may file several appeals. He has the money. He's not just going to say, okay, lock me up and I'll wait. They're going to fight this tooth and nail the whole way. He was ordered to pay a fine of $25,000 plus the costs of prosecution as part of the sentence. Well, I mean, to Bill Cosby, that's chump change. That's like a cup of coffee. You know, he probably said, "Do you want a pastry with that?" Because that's a cup of coffee to me. In addition, O'Neill ruled that Cosby will be classified as a sexually violent predator, a determination that requires lifetime registration, lifetime mandatory sex offender counseling with a treatment provider, and notification to the community that a sexually violent predator lives in the area. Cosby was booked in Montgomery County Correctional Facility and will be transferred to SCI Phoenix, a state prison in Collegeville, according to Corey Emerson, Public Affairs Manager for Montgomery County. So, it kind of goes into some details of the trial. It all started in 2004, and we've had dozens of women afterwards come and kind of tell the same story. And unless there's collusion between these women, unless they've talked to each other or they're friends, it's interesting that so many of these women have come out with the exact same story. That they met up with the Jello Meister, got drugged with something, and then he went to town on them. So, I'm not saying that alone makes him guilty, but when you have so many women all saying the same thing again and again, it's just kind of, it just doesn't look good. It's not a good look. The first criminal trial against Cosby ended in a hung jury, But in April, Cosby was convicted of 3 counts of aggravated indecent assault for drugging and assaulting Constand in the first high-profile celebrity criminal trial of the #MeToo era. No one is above the law, and no one should be treated differently or disproportionately. Now, Cosby spokesperson Andrew Wyatt unleashed on the media, judge, and prosecutors after the sentence, calling the prosecution the most racist and sexist trial in the history of the United States. I guess the prosecution, they were Klansmen or something. Or was this a case, Mr. Wyatt, where because Mr. Cosby's African American, he was found guilty, therefore it was racist? I mean, wasn't his victims, weren't they also African American? I mean, most of his victims, they weren't Caucasian, were they? I don't know. He might have rushed a little bit in with the race card here. Not. I mean, if you don't have proof that somebody was racist in the proceedings, I don't really feel you should be throwing the race card. If you throw it too much, it waters it down, and then when you deal with real racists, actual racists who are actively going after people based on the color of their skin, when you cry wolf too many times, it waters down the word. And sadly, I kind of feel like the terms racist and sexist have become so watered down because they're just thrown around like confetti, just all the time. I really think we need to be a little more careful when throwing out terms like racist and sexist, and only apply these harsh terms when you know that's what's going on. They persecuted Jesus, and look what happened. I'm not saying Mr. Cosby is Jesus, but we know what this country has done to black men for centuries, Wyatt said. Last I heard, Jesus wasn't real fond on drugging and sexually assaulting women. Bill, listen, this Mr. Wyatt, Andrew, it might be time to give him his walking papers. That I don't know how much this is helping you. Gloria Allred, the victim's rights attorney who represents several women who say they were assaulted by Cosby, praised the sentence as a long journey to justice. We're glad that Judgment Day has finally come for Mr. Cosby, she said. Mr. Cosby has shown no remorse, and there has been no justice for many of the accusers who were barred from a court by the arbitrary time limits imposed by the statute of limitations. Now, this is important, and what she brings up here, the statute of limitations. People, whether you're male or you're female, if you're assaulted, especially if you're sexually assaulted, you need to report it immediately. Immediately. Like as soon as the assaulter takes their hands and other body parts off of you, you need to be getting up, getting your clothes on, putting your shoes on, grabbing your belongings, and you need to be running out the door, calling 911 as you run. Immediately. Go to the authorities immediately. Forget about the shame. Forget about you can't play that card. And I know it's painful and I know it's difficult. But here's the thing. If you don't report it immediately, the possibility of the person who victimized you just walking away scot-free goes up exponentially. You can't. If you wait decades later, well, then it kind of becomes a he said, she said, and just report it immediately. Immediately. Get their DNA. Get their fingerprints. Yeah. And I know some people will say, well, there's not always DNA. There's not always fingerprints. Well, try. I've seen cases where a woman was raped and the rapist actually had her take a shower. Stood there and watched her as she took a shower. But guess what? The DNA was still there. She got out of that shower. She put her clothes on. She ran. She went to the police. They still found his DNA. DNA just doesn't immediately come off of you like that. So get them, bust them, catch them. Let's get them in jail. Get them in jail immediately. All right, let's see what the victims have to say. Ahead of the sentence, Constand wrote a 5-page letter to the court explaining how Cosby's assault and the ensuing legal battle had changed her life. As a Temple University employee, she looked up to Cosby, a Temple trustee, as a mentor and friend. He used that position of power and trust, as well as his public persona as Dr. Huxtable, to take advantage of her. Bill Cosby took my beautiful, healthy young spirit and crushed it. He robbed me of my health and vitality, my open nature, and my trust in myself and others, she wrote in the impact statement. The judge apparently was moved by her statement. I have given weight to the victim impact testimony in this case, and it was powerful, he said. Kathy McGee, a former actress who had accused Cosby of raping her, told CNN that listening to the news about Cosby's sentencing stirs up some very difficult and deep emotions. I'm happy that the judge sentenced Bill Cosby accordingly, and I'm grateful to Andrea for standing strong. Chelan Lasha, another of Cosby's alleged victims, also praised the sentence. I'm very happy to know that Mr. Cosby will do time in prison, that he is touchable like he touched us unwillingly. And depending on who his roommate is, he may be getting touched a lot. Them cheeks may be getting busted. Mm-hmm. We are grateful that the court understood the seriousness of Cosby's crime and sentenced him to prison, said Jody O'Meara, Vice President of Communications at RAINN, R-A-I-N-N. Let's hope that the legacy of this case is that victims feel empowered to come forward knowing that they can truly make a difference in bringing perpetrators to justice. Exactly. Ladies and men. Sexual assault cases on men have been going up in recent years. Reported immediately. It doesn't matter. This actually shows it doesn't matter who the person it is. It doesn't matter how powerful they are, how rich they are, how whatever. Go to the police. Go immediately. They'll do a kit. They'll collect evidence. And the sooner you report it, the more of these scumbags we can get behind bars and off the streets. And that's one of the saddest things, is that if you don't report it immediately, if you go home and you sleep on it for a week, a month, 6 months, a year, you're allowing that rapist, that sexual assaulter, to go out and assault other women. Just report it immediately. And not only are you helping get them off the streets, but you're also going to get the help that you need. You're going to get the counseling and assistance for what you're going through, because as the woman said, this affected her deep inside. It affected her spirit. It affected her mental health. If she had reported it immediately, he most likely would have went to jail immediately, and she could have gotten help and assistance beforehand. Cosby's case tests the Me Too movement. Several of Cosby's alleged victims arrived to court for sentencing, including supermodel Janice Dickinson. She was one of the 5 prior bad acts witnesses who testified at the criminal trial that Cosby had incapacitated and assaulted them without their consent. So We see the judge, he didn't allow bail. He was probably worried that Cosby would flee. The prosecutors said that Cosby had a private plane. Cosby jumped up and yelled, "He doesn't have a plane, you a-hole," referring to himself in the third person. "He only has a freezer full of Jell-O pudding pop." He may not have a private plane, but I could understand the judge worrying that with his money and his power and connections, he could easily get on a private plane and be out of, be out of town, be out of the country. He'd be like Roman Polanski. That's what he did. He raped a little girl. He drugged and raped a little 13-year-old girl in a hot tub, and when the law came knocking, he had jumped on a plane and flew out of the country and went to countries where he was sheltered and protected for his crime of raping a little girl. We see he's an 81-year-old blind man, and his attorney said he's an 81-year-old blind man, and he's not self-sufficient, and he's not a danger unless to himself. See, that's the thing. As old as he is, he's probably going to be put in the geriatric unit in the prison, which it's kind of more like a hospital wing. I doubt he's going to be in general population. And they're probably going to have him in protective custody, because you're going to have prisoners who would want to bust his cheeks, who would want to attack him just for the notoriety, just for the, make themselves famous. He apologized for the outbursts about the plane, saying Mr. Cosby's frustration got the better of him. When Mr. Seals' witnesses at the trial made outbursts, that was excused, everybody understands. But when the defendant makes one, it deserves 3 pages in a sentencing. Well, obviously emotions were running high. He was out of jail on for 5 months on a $1 million bail, and they do plan to appeal his conviction. So, what do you think? Do you think Cosby was guilty? Do you think he was set up? Was this a racist trial? Was the judge and the prosecutors and the victims, were they racist against him? Had he been a white comedian and had done this to several women, would he have walked free? And what do you think when people, be they women or men, do they need to come forward? Do you agree with me that they need to come forward immediately? Get in there immediately. Go to the authorities. Go to the hospital. Get the fingerprints and rape kit and DNA collected. And that's where I stand. Go immediately. If anything, I hope this empowers women and men, anyone who's a victim to sexual assault, to report it and seek help immediately. Like I said, let's get this trash off the street. Bill's going to be singing a different song these days. It's not going to be "There's Always Room for Jello." His new song is going to be "I'm Spending Time in Jailo." It's Jeremy again, people. And as always, be good or be good at it. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share this on your social media, and hey, let me know. What do you think about the Cosby verdict? What do you think about him spending 3 to 10 years in prison? Do you think he'll spend the whole 10 years? Do you think it'll get knocked down to 3? Perhaps maybe he's even out in a year and a half or so on good behavior? Let me know what you think below, and I'll catch you next time.